Gents, thank you very much for being part of the panel. Oliver from the UK, Bill, we've heard this morning from the US, and Safiy, of course, from the US. So, gents, I would like to start by the fact that you are all, I guess, international speakers. You've been in Australia for how many hours? Probably a couple of days, let's say. But what's glaringly obvious to you that we're missing from your international experience? And obviously the UK is going to be different from the US, but who would like to start with?
You know, what I've, I guess what I've seen in my experience, I think something that is key, not so much, you know, I hate to call out mandates. I don't think it has to be something that comes from legislature or government, but a set of standards or guidelines that sort of impact your work, I think goes a long way. And I'm starting to see some of it with some of the work that Bausmith is doing with the content development that is really impacting the work that you guys are doing and how you're using that information. But if I look at big picture, I would say some guidelines. And once again, it doesn't necessarily have to come from government or from legislature, but you know, if there's a organization that is leading the way, that is helping to put that out there, I think that's very helpful. So hopefully you guys are on your way.
Well, I'm not trying to be diplomatic, but I'm not going to say that I have seen anything that you're flagrantly missing. What I could do is, there's no owners like me. If I were back in the States and I was in a session like this, I would really invite a chance to be in a room like this with the subs and the CMs and owners, because that's where, you know, part of why I'm here is to convey what's of high value to the owner. And if you get owners in here blended in with the subs, I mentioned it before, I love talking to subs because I want to go right to the source, find out how they can be efficient, because if they're efficient, I'm efficient. So I would just encourage to have forums like this where you blend owners as much as you possibly can with all the other, the builders and the contractors.
I think you're touching on a very, very important point, Bill, because today, if you look at the team cycle, there's very big two stages, I guess. There's the design of the construction, and then the operation and maintenance. And the real beneficiary is obviously this last one-third, which is the owner-operator. The asset life cycle, maybe 100 years, design and construction 10 years. And who's bearing the brunt of the BIM process? It's actually the design and construction at this stage. So if I ask a question here, how many owner-operators are in the room? Yeah, none. None. Okay, one. Right? So if we would have asked that question 5 years ago, I can assure you there were last two of the stage. So it is a very valid point, because the biggest stakeholder is not around this table. And that's important for us as an industry to raise the awareness to those guys that you got to be in this discussion, because it's well beyond just the design and construction. Eventually, it's going to be about you and about what you need. So moving on, I want to hand it over to Oliver, because you guys obviously have BIM mandate, and you know this is a topic that we always talk about. But I want to ask you, you've been through the transition from no mandate to mandate. What are the pros and cons?
I think it's fair to say that some of the cons to start with is that it's made a lot of people engage with BIM without necessarily having any idea what it is. So you could say it's a pro, you could say it's a con. It's a pro because people are starting to pay attention to it. It's a con because there's a lot of people, therefore, you know, certainly across the government sector, who say, oh, we've got to do BIM. And so, you know, I've worked on a lot of tenders and bids for asset management systems, and you get a line in there that says you've got to do BIM. You've got to support BIM. You've got to be compliant with BIM. Your system must be compliant with BIM. And it shows a slight lack of understanding. They've not done the depth of reading. They haven't got the depth of knowledge before trying to take that step forward. On a positive, it has led to creation of a number of groups, one of which I'm reasonably familiar with is the BIM Task Group for the UK, who has worked to try and help to develop some of the COBie standards, take them a step forward. I know not everyone's a fan of COBie, and there's certainly some limitations when you're looking at infrastructure assets and things like that, but you know, it's a starting point, just like you were saying. You know, you've got to have a starting point for these guidelines to grow out. So having the mandate has pushed those forward, but also at the same time maybe drawn a load of people in who aren't quite ready yet, whether that's for BIM itself or even to take asset management that step further into the operational life cycle.
And as a vendor, sorry, that's a little bit loud. As a vendor, Oliver, did you experience any change to your, I guess, market requirements from you as a vendor?
Yeah, so a lot of people, as I say, started adding into their requirements. You know, your system must be BIM compliant, and you know, what does that actually mean? So we have to start responding to that. It drove the software application forward. I mean, the information I was showing in the session earlier today was driven by the market. It was something that, yes, it's great for us to be able to consume the information from the model, but you know, had that not come from the market, then it probably isn't something we'd have necessarily driven forward. Similarly with Trimble's strategy, it aligns very well when you're looking at the design, build, operate phase, and it gives us that whole sort of picture, and all of the sort of tools that we have are being sort of drawn in together using the Trimble Connect application to try and feed the data that's captured throughout the design and build for utilization in the operational cycle.
All right. I'm going to hand over the microphone back to Safiy, if you don't mind. Safiy, I'm reading in your bio that you have 20 agencies within your department, managing developments including libraries, museums, fire stations, transport facilities, etc. So obviously there is quite a diverse set of people working under your leadership. Is there a single point of truth? How do you share all this information? Do you have a single repository?
No, and you know, it's not a direct relation to my specific department. It is over 20 client agencies that we represent as an agency. So those client agencies sort of send DDC their work to do on their behalf. When it comes to BIM, you know, and this sort of single source, there isn't that. No, there isn't that specifically, and then it gets even more complicated and convoluted when it comes to how the 20 clients sort of operate and maintain their facilities, because they all do it differently. Where we do see some benefit is, I guess we're sort of the BIM bottleneck when it comes to implementation of BIM on these projects. So we, in my department, get to steer and somewhat control the outcomes and really the value of BIM, what it means to us as an agency, and how it's going to impact the client's project. You know, I wish there were a national standard, and that there was you know, you mentioned a sort of single source of truth, that we sort of had those capabilities, but it just doesn't exist. So we have to sort of manage that and create it for our projects specifically.
Bill, same question, I guess, from a campus point of view. Do you have a single point of repository or a single point of truth?
Princeton is uniquely centralized. Not at a city standpoint, but I have some peer institutions, UPenn, for example, that are Harvard, very big name schools that are very decentralized. Functions very much the same way a city institution would, where there are different funding sources, different control centers. if you're going to try to manage a situation like that, you have to try to get them to align on what their expectations are, what their value system is going to be for a BIM project. And some of those institutions that I've talked to are trying to do that. It's a struggle because they all have their own money and therefore they have their own attitude and their own egos and they want to do it their own way. But if you're going to try to make, your job easier to try to deliver a consistent product to all these clients, you have to get them to sort of agree on basic deliverable quality of the deliverables. At Princeton, we are very centralized, and it really comes down to people like me who know what the operations and maintenance people need at a minimum to be provided, and then I take it upon myself to make sure that the standards we write and the communications we send out to the subs and the CMs are consistent and clear. Having been in their shoes, I know that if you tell me what you want clearly up front, I'll give it to you. But don't hit me with this later after I've already, inked the contract. Yeah.
Okay. While you have the microphone, Bill. I see in your bio as well that you sort of 50-50 experience over being on the contracting side and also on the facility management side. In your point of view, what are the biggest gaps that needs to be bridged between those two parties?
Well, I touched on the most important one before. I think back home and even here when I talk to subs, subs are builders. Let's just refer to the generic. The builders that are on the receiving end of these BIM requirements, they're confused. They're dealing with an AE who's translating the owner's expectations in a spec. They're reading the spec. They're trying to interpret what it is. They look at a poorly coordinated design model, and yet they feel that the burden is put on them to deliver a good, high-quality, BIM model. So I think, understandably so, when you're on the building side, the industry needs to be a little more clear, and that's why I'm trying to work hard to have very clear BIM standards and trying to watch a little more closely to make sure that and frankly, what's working now is the BIM standards that we have and the BIM standards that I'm updating now are something that the architects have never really written on their own. So they're very happy to just copy and paste it. They don't try to reinterpret it. And that way I have a higher level of confidence that that's exactly what's going in the subs contract. As long as they've read it, they'll have a very clear understanding. And then the other practice that we do implement is we take the model, our builders, we require them to do an open house to all the CMs where they show them the model, they walk them through the BIM spec, they walk them through the BIM 360 glue and field applications, and they lay out for them what my expectations are. And I sit in the room and I make sure they got it right. So that's a very important thing. So anybody that's trying to do that across any campus or institutional setting, you've got to, if that's really what you want, you actually have to have a personal involvement in making sure that the receiving end people, the builders, understand what you want.
Thank you. I'll come back to you two as I guess owner and operators of assets, but before I do that, Oliver, from your UK experience, what brought the owner to the table? What brought the owner or the operator of the asset to the table? What brought this person to the discussion? What attracted him? Is it the legislation or the mandate? Or?
Yeah, I mean, definitely the legislation brought most people that we speak to the table. There were a few people who had some experience in BIM from other roles, from where they'd worked, who want to make use of that information. But certainly the vast majority of people who we are exposed to come to BIM or want to make use of BIM because of the mandate. But I think it's sort of what you have to do when you're looking at that, and it's not just the point of saying I'm going to use this on the project, I'm going to use BIM on the project. If we're starting to look at how we can then utilise that and move it into to make use of the information, the data, the visualization tools and so on into the operational life cycle, you've got to try and build that on top of existing processes. And as you were saying, Bill, you've got to involve the people right at that who are going to operate, who are going to maintain that building, right at the start of the project. Find out the information you want, find out the information you need. And that's always been, I think, a disconnect between the designers and the operators, and hopefully BIM is bridging that gap, but it's the mandate that's brought it. And I do think you've got to not necessarily come in and say, okay, here's BIM, here's a whole new way of working, here's a whole new way of operating the building. You've got to build on top of the existing processes that they're already going through to reduce the amount of change control that you're trying to, or the amount of change management you've got to do with the people who are running that maintenance. Because if you have 100 buildings, say, and you've got 2 of them are done in BIM and 98 of them are not done in BIM, you want to make sure that they're not doing a completely different thing for 2 buildings, because it just makes it more unlikely that you're going to maintain that information. You've got to make sure you're building the processes from where you are, and BIM adds value, and BIM brings additional benefit to those individuals who are maintaining the information and maintaining the assets. And then over time, you will see that, like you were saying again earlier today, Disney, an organization like that, will change that faster. Their percentage of BIM managed buildings will increase much quicker, but we'll all get there if we start. But certainly from the UK, the mandate is what's driven. Certainly is what I'm exposed to. The people who I'm exposed to are what's driving that. I deal a lot in the government, in the public sector, and so they really they often pick up the phone, not knowing a thing about it, and just say, we've been told to do BIM, we know you do BIM, can you come and tell us about it? Which is why it's sometimes a con, because we want to see that they're a little bit more experienced than that when we speak to them. Yeah, it is a start. You've got to start somewhere, definitely. So that's why it's also a positive.
Okay. Look, I got a couple more questions for Safiy and Bill. Andy talked about disruptive technology. Now, you have obviously quite established assets from libraries or buildings that are obviously not even on a plan, let alone 3D models. Are you considering any of what we call disruptive technology, maybe laser scanning, to start completing the bigger picture?
Yes.
We look at our portfolio, our assets. Although we aren't operating and maintaining those buildings as an agency, it's something our client agencies do. As an agency, what we do, what does happen on these projects is we revisit these projects many times over the course of years. So, as I mentioned during the presentation, 1 year we may do an exterior renovation. 2-3 years down the line, we'll do rooftop replacement, and 5 years later we'll be replacing some mechanical equipment, and we definitely see laser scanning, and we own a Faro scanner. We also own a Leica scanner as well. We look to incorporate that into our work and building up those assets, only if it's to help sort of inform us in terms of what's going on in our buildings, or providing that sort of existing conditions, sort of context model to our consultants who are actually doing design work.
So I'll elaborate on
I'm not going to let you off the hook with a yes.
So I was talking to several people about this, because it is sort of the biggest challenge that I have, is trying to take, I'll describe it as a static building. This is a legacy building. We're not doing anything to it, but you're trying to bring that building into a new BIM platform. You're trying, as I mentioned before, you built this deliverable that's really great and really cool, and you want to bring legacy information in and have it blend nicely without compromising the validity of the data. So laser scanning is an option. We've done a lot of laser scanning, but that's usually when we're going to go in and touch a building. Okay, that we've got figured out. We've done it in many different ways. But to use laser scanning in an existing building, I actually have a hybrid project going on right now where I'm using a blend of things. It's a 3-story building. I've gutted and completely done the lower floor, laser scan. Subs are all doing 3D modeling in the basement. The upper 2 floors, I'm taking 2D legacy drawings, which I personally know are pretty accurate because I ran the project 8 years ago. And I'm having the subs, I'm having another firm do a 2D to 3D Revit translation for that. And I'm paying the subs an extra to validate the location of the emergency response points of control for the building. That's an important distinction, because one thing I know, that if I were to try to bring a legacy building into operations and maintenance, they don't really care where the pipes are. I care where the pipes are, because I'm going to tear the building apart when I rebuild it. They just want to know how to maintain it, how to shut things off, how to find points of control. That specific function, I would entertain using laser scanning if it could help me locate where those things are in the building and convert them into a Revit model. That would then bring me to the point where I'd say, great, now I'll pay to have the shell, the geometry laser scanned, so I've got the space, and then I can start dropping these verified locations of control points and maybe some asset. But I'm not going to render documentation that I know is antiquated. I'm not going to render system information which is hidden under, above sheetrock ceilings. So that's a very specific approach where I would use a light version of laser scanning, but it's really only after I've defined what I really want to get.
Very good answer, thank you. So we're seeing it here also, it's becoming a little bit more mainstream in the laser scanning. So architects using it for, let's say, retrofitting buildings. But also we're seeing it beyond that. So we're working with a local client here where they manage power assets underground. So basically for them to figure out whether there's a conduit that is big enough to run a new cable, they have to shut the street for a few hours. They have maybe to pump water out of the pit, and then it takes a whole lot of money, and obviously there's a massive risk, and laser scanning is helping them do that. So look, that's it all from me. Being I'm from Autodesk and Oliver from Trimble, I guess I would like to put it to you. What would you like to see from vendors? Before we close off with a couple of questions from the floors, what advice do you have for the vendors?
Not advice, I have requests. There's a lot I think we are missing, and maybe other owners are doing a better job, but I'm very interested in saving. Frankly put, I want manufacturer asset information delivered to me in the barcode that comes with the piece of equipment. I want that in a way that's consistent from manufacturer to manufacturer. I'd rather not have a sub or anybody have to type that information into field. I'd rather just hit a barcode on it, retrieve it, and import it into my system. So that's one very specific thing that I've been thinking about. I'd like to have that.
So is Chris still in the room? Chris, do you hear him? No. Okay, because he talked. No, that's fine. Look, he talked about the use of 360 glue, but also field can do that. Safiy, what would you like to see from vendors?
I think you guys do a fairly good job, but in supporting, it's difficult, right? In supporting some of these workflows, and I'll use the laser scanning as a particular example. Someone had mentioned that sort of conversion piece, and that's difficult at this point. We have the ability to go out and capture these point clouds and millions of points. Getting that into a usable piece of information for me as an owner, or for even a design consultant, is time-consuming and difficult. So I think along the way, you guys are getting a lot better at delivering products that one, you guys find profitable, and also that we on the sort of other side of that find useful. But yeah, more of that is always helpful.
Okay, thank you. Samit, do we have time for a couple of questions quickly from the floor? Any questions?
Hi, Graham Mackerel. My question is to Safiy and to Bill. Given that you own assets that could be at risk of some form of external attack, I know the Property Council here in Australia have recently been looking at the prospect of having their mainframes hacked via the BMS system. Is there any concern that you have, or what sort of firewall protection do you have around the sort of information that you're storing now digitally? that could be accessed by somebody that wants to do harm to you?
Well, the two answers to that. All of our local hosted stuff, our information, our PCS, all our digital content library and all that is in a data center. It's in the same, it's on virtual servers and it's managed by the same people that maintain all the university information. So simply put, we're like most owners, you put your trust in the experts that are on your team to protect your investment, and that's a data center issue. They're the experts. The only other sort of risky element, and it's a topic for conversation for some, I'm not terribly worried about it, is the posting of these documents to the cloud services, right? So all of our BIM 360 field documents are on the Autodesk Amazon cloud service, and we are putting our trust in that vendor that they're protecting that data.
For the most part, it's the same here. We have a whole agency dedicated to information technology and security of all of the city's information. But at the same, in the same sort of token, we have all of this protection around our data and around information. Yet, all of what we do at the end of the day is information that belongs to the public, and the public can request anything from us as an agency under various laws in various jurisdictions. So much of it is public information, accessible by the public anyway, and the information that is too secure or sort of critical information, it just isn't. And whether that is, protection via a firewall or, a drawing at the building department that, someone can't walk up and buy for a few bucks. It's protected some way or the other, or it's not.
I think Dominic had last question here.
Thank you. My question is related to the very elusive idea of return on investment, and there have been many presentations at BIM conferences that I've seen. In my 10 or so years that I've been dealing with BIM, I have never seen anyone being able to explain to me in clear facts how their return on investment works. So I tend to the view that we rather should probably talk about the benefits. And I know in the UK there are now some studies based on the mandate and some case studies that are with clear sort of benchmarking of benefits over certain periods and cost benchmarking overall. But anywhere else really, it seems to be a bit of a leap of faith that you take and you just go for it and you hope for the best. We have some sort of statistics that tell us BIM helps, but and to be more precise about a question now, what have you got in your organization that helps you to determine very clearly the benefits you get from BIM and the benefits that you believe the consultants and the contractors who work with you get from BIM, in that, if that's something you actually consider as part of your guidelines?
I guess directly I would speak to coordination on our projects, and I think as a industry or the use of BIM is probably an easy one, where in the past I had CMs and general contractors who would go out in the field with a set of design documents, so a set of two-dimensional drawings that were produced, and they would go out in the field and begin building what they see. Maybe they caught it during the shop drawing process, maybe not. But I think the whole coordination of models has reduced conflicts in the field tremendously. If you implement the right sort of process, and we in our sort of BIM spec for the different trades and how we are procuring BIM via the trades on our projects, we outline how the whole coordination process works, and we are reducing the amount of conflicts in the field tremendously on our projects, and I think that has a lot of direct benefit.
Do you have any data on that? Do you have any matrix for that question came before? How do you measure? Do you measure it? How do you measure it?
Yeah, we're really, I'll be honest with you, man. We're really not that interested in measuring it. It's a government agency where, for decades you have piles and piles of data on a piece of paper, change orders that, stacked to the ceiling. And the sort of direct opposite of that is, now I have 0 change orders on this project. Is it a result of BIM or not? No, no one's looking to measure that. No one's looking to measure that in that specific way. Does the data exist? It might. It's in some various system somewhere. Maybe we need some data analytics, to actually produce that information. But it's not in our bottom line. It's not driving our profit. I'll use laser scanning as an example. I have a couple employees who operate the laser scan, and is there a direct benefit that I can send them out on a project once a week to scan a building? Where's the benefit in that? We don't, but there's no, we're not looking to turn a profit as a city of New York. So maybe just archiving and capturing that information, we may see some long-term benefit in it versus are we being profitable today? So the metrics is a little bit less of a concern for us.
So I'll support the response in that we're not that interested, kind of. So believe me, Autodesk, the team that I'm working with, they're frustrated with my lack of willingness or dedication to collecting metrics, to answer your question. They want it very bad because that's what a lot of the people they're appealing to are starving for. They don't want to take a leap of faith, but guess what? That's what we all did. We took a leap of faith with some high confidence that this is going to be at least a good gamble. And once you're into it for 5-6 years and you're talking to the subs and you're looking at the change order rates going down, it's blatantly clear that there's rather large scales of savings. So you can look at just the change order, a potential change order avoided on a $300 million job that was structural in nature alone paid for your investment on that job and the next 2 jobs. So for us, the investment was rather light. And when you're an owner and you say, holy smokes, that would have cost me a ton, you stop worrying about collecting the metrics and you start then to just focusing on, all right, why did that one get caught and the other smaller one didn't? Or you start to focus on the process glitches and less about the charts with the savings, this so many change orders versus so much invested. And the upfront investment is almost like a one-time deal. Other than my time and my rather small staff's time sort of tweaking the standards, my investment was done and it was paid for. So I'm confident of that. There's one thing that's come up recently, and that is I'm also realizing that I'm starting to realize that we are asking the subcontractors, for example, to do a lot more updating of the as-built models with every SK, every sketch, every addendum. It's something they didn't used to have to do, and it's something I need done because I want that as-built to be accurate. So what they do is they're submitting change orders. And I sit down with the subs and I say, okay, dude, you're giving me an $80,000 change order. Show me what changed. And I literally make them show me the before and after models. And that $80,000 number goes down about 15 grand. And I have sort of set a deal to say, okay, as long as I understand the level of effort you've put into this and it's given me an as-built model that I can trust, it's worth the money. Because I know as soon as I take that as-built money, as I've said before, if I give that as-built model to operations and it's glitchy and inaccurate, then the whole investment bottom falls out. So it's worth that. and I'm starting to feel a little more inclined about trying to track that because it's a change order, and I can attribute it to one specific thing. And if it gets too big a number, I'll start to look back to the AE and say, you know how much you cost me in these SKs and addendums? Because you didn't do coordinate. If I can attribute these to coordination issues, I'll go back to their E&O insurance and start to say, and this may be different here, apparently it's different the way you do it here. We hold E&O and insurance, and if they miss these things in design, I have full right to go back to them and hold them accountable for their lack of coordination in design. And if I offset that with a change order, so be it. So that's when I get interested in matrix, in metrics, but it's not the overall BIM investment.
Just to add one sort of final thing to that as well. I mean, I spoke in my presentation just around the collection of the data and the added cost. So moving it into the operations, the data that you can hold within the model, and if you can pass that into the maintenance team, they don't need to go out and collect that information. And I think it's not my numbers, I was lifting it from another presentation, but it's about 8 times more expensive to go and collect that data once you're into an operational phase. As it is to actually consuming that or collecting that information through the construction and design. But also just to apply that to one of the clients that we work with, the Environment Agency, their particular interest in getting this information together right through the design and construction phase so they can hand it over is so that they then make sure that they're upkeeping the asset in line with the standards that they themselves have set for that asset type. And a simple benefit there is it means people's homes don't flood. So, it's not a quantifiable, it's X amount of cash saving until you get to the point of an insurance company would have come in and put a number on that flood value. So, in infrastructure assets and things like that, there's more quantifiable numbers that, or less quantifiable, I should say. You can't really tell what they are unless something does go wrong.